Hello. Hey, everyone. Clay here. Amanda's off this week, so we thought since we're covering Halloween Kills this month on Patreon, and we're not covering Halloween 2018, we would re-up our episode where we did cover Halloween 2018, which was way back. It was our 17th episode. So if you want to brush up on what we thought about Halloween 2018, because I probably need to as well, check this out, and we'll be back next time with Todd Browning's Freaks. And follow us on Patreon so you can listen to our thoughts about Halloween Kills at patreon.com/thepenskyfile, where you can hear our coverage of all the other Halloween films and also our coverage of the Friday the 13th series, of the Video Nasty series, of the Second String Stephen King. There's so much stuff on there. You should go listen to it. Anyway, enjoy Halloween 2018. Thanks, guys. Hey everyone, welcome again to the Rotten Horror Picture Show, the horror movie podcast where we talk about films off of the Rotten Tomatoes 200 Greatest Horror Movies of All Time list. I think I'm starting to get this down. I think I've done a few in a row that have all been more or less the same.
Yeah.
So hopefully it sounds like it makes sense now.
A thin veneer of professionalism.
Yeah, the thinnest. My name is Clay, and with me as always is Amanda. How are you doing, Amanda?
I'm just dandy. How are you?
I'm not bad. We are taking a detour into remake slash reboot slash alternate timeline sequel today with number 91 on the list, 2018's Halloween.
Spooky.
It's number 91 on the list. It has a 79% Rotten Tomatoes score, adjusted score of 95.194. You are a big Halloween fan, are you not?
I am.
And had you seen this before?
I had not. This is one that I was. I stayed away from it because I was terrified it was going to ruin something I loved.
I see. So you're not a Halloween fan in that you just devour everything that has the Halloween name on it. You just really like the original.
Yes, I'm a purist.
Have you seen any of the sequels?
I think you and I and some friends watched 3.
Right, yes.
Yes.
I think that was last year, yeah.
I think so. So I think 3, and I think I've seen some of the, oh God, maybe one of the really late sequels, like partially on TV or something. I don't really remember.
Well, it doesn't matter because this doesn't have anything to do with any of those. So,
which was great.
Yes. I saw this in the theater last year or 2 years ago now when it came out. I was given when I heard who was making this, I was a little bit hesitant. And then I watched Vice Principals on HBO, which is one of the best television shows I've seen in the last 10 years and is so funny, but also so extremely dark that
I am so unsurprised that you enjoyed that show.
Oh, it was so good. Did you not enjoy Vice Principals?
Not my favorite.
But it's so funny, but it's also so dark. And so when I heard that David Gordon Green and Danny McBride were going to do a Halloween movie, I was just excited for whatever they ended up coming out with because it was going to be interesting. At the very least, and I think that's they succeeded in that front. But yeah, so we'll play the trailer real quick, and then we'll get into talking about it.
We're here to investigate a patient that killed 3 innocent teenagers on a Halloween in 1978. He was shot by his own psychiatrist and taken into custody that night, and has spent the last 40 years in captivity. Hello, Michael. I have something you might like to see.
Everyone in my family, turns into a nutcase this time of year. Yeah, I mean, your grandmother is Laurie Strode. She was almost murdered.
Wasn't it her brother who murdered all those babysitters?
No, it was not her brother. That's something that people made up.
Do you know that I pray every night that he would escape?
What the hell did you do that for?
So I can kill him.
Dad, look out!
The bus crashed.
Mom, what bus crashed?
Michael escaped.
Excuse me, somebody's in here.
Hello?
He's waited for this night. He's waited for me. I've waited for him. Get out! Go home! Get inside! You don't believe in the boogeyman? He's here! Michael! You should.
Can you close the closet door?
All right, Halloween. Technically Halloween 2018, just to try to be less confusing. Directed by David Gordon Green, written by Jeff Fradley, Danny McBride, and David Gordon Green, starring Jamie Lee Curtis, Judy Greer, Andy Matichak, and some amazing child actors.
Yeah.
What happens in this movie, Amanda?
It's been 40 years since Laurie Strode survived a vicious attack from crazed killer Michael Myers on Halloween night. Locked up in an institution, Myers manages to escape when his bus transfer goes horribly wrong. Laurie now faces a terrifying showdown when the masked madman returns to Haddonfield, Illinois. But this time, she's ready for him.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yes. So some things you will find in this movie include excessive Lonnie references, but no actual Lonnie.
Mm-hmm. Where is he?
Nobody knows.
Nobody knows.
Nobody knows. Literal headlamps.
Mm-hmm.
Multi-generational ass-kicking.
Always good.
Mannequin-based decorating.
Mm-hmm. Scare the kids.
And everybody's favorite, questionable parenting.
3 generations of questionable parenting. Well, technically...
a lot of questionable parenting in this.
I guess...
A lot of...
I don't know. I guess... what's her name? Alyssa? Is that the main girl?
Allison.
Allison. God, I'm so bad at these names. I'll tell you, the only reason I knew it was an A-L name was because I was just looking at the cast list like 5 minutes ago. Otherwise, I would not have known in a million years what her name was. Her family doesn't seem too bad, but her grandmother obviously has some problems.
Yeah, just a few.
Yeah. As I mentioned, this is a sequel. It is a sequel to the original Halloween. Mm-hmm. The original Halloween, which has had 5, 6, 7 sequels and a remake. Jesus. And a sequel to that remake already. This movie is ignoring everything but the original. So gone is Michael Myers and Laurie Strode being brother and sister. Gone is any reference to the secret order of the naked fawn or whatever the hell it's called in episode 6 or whatever.
Oh God.
Gone is the fact that Laurie Strode was a school teacher at a private school for a while in Halloween H20. Gone is Busta Rhymes. Gone is the Rob Zombie remix.
I think that's maybe the one that I saw a part of on TV a long time ago. Was the one with Busta Rhymes in it. I was just like, fuck this. I can't do this.
Yes. Gone is the Rob Zombie remake and its sequel. Just the first one and this one, which isn't really that helpful because now they're both named Halloween, so it gets a little confusing. But we have definitely entered an interesting era where sequels, remakes, and reboots are so prevalent that you can do something like this and have it be totally accepted and not weird at all, which I'm totally fine with. I think, as far as I'm not a huge continuity person, so if it's a good movie, I'm happy to watch it. I don't care what it's a sequel of and what it isn't a sequel of. How do you feel about this trend?
I like it. I like it because I think it lets audiences access something of the nostalgia that's been such a big thing in so much of like media and entertainment in the last like 10 or so years. But you don't need to have done all of the homework to actually enjoy it. Like if you've watched the original Halloween, even just once, like I've watched it a lot, but even if you've just seen it once, you're gonna get the echoes in this movie. You're gonna see the references and the sort of homages, and you're gonna feel that sense of like knowing, which can be really satisfying when you're watching it, where it's like, oh my god, he's gonna do this thing again, or he's gonna it's following the tradition and the patterns set out by the original. And it kind of just lets you cut out all the superfluous stuff and all the kind of questionable choices that have been made in the last, 40 years.
Yeah.
Because that's a long time. Like the original Halloween came out in 1978.
Yeah.
And this came out 40 years later. That's a very wide period of time to make a lot of bad decisions with your franchise.
And they sure did.
They sure did.
I think on the list of horror movie franchises, Halloween has always been, of the big four or big three, it's always been my least favorite because I feel like it was the least consistent, and I never really liked Michael Myers. I didn't think he was very interesting. They do all these backflips, like I was saying, as far as these mystical things they add on to him to try and make him more interesting, and familiar relationships and try to make him more interesting. And the thing that they do in this movie that actually makes me care about Michael Myers and kind of reassess my feelings of the character is they realize that the thing about him that works is if he has absolutely zero motivation other than the fact that he just likes killing people.
Yep.
And the genius of this movie, which I think last episode I said there was one thing they didn't do in this movie which really would have put it over the top for me, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But the thing that they do really smartly in this is they, if however convoluted a little bit, they manage to figure out how to get Michael Myers and Laurie Strode together without Laurie Strode being the thing that he's after. Like, the only reason that they come into contact at all in this movie is because evil Dr. Loomis drives him to Laurie's house. And she just happens to be there.
Oh. That's a really good point. I hadn't really put that together.
Yeah, and they take this character of Laurie Strode, who was so affected by the horror that she witnessed at the hands of Michael Myers 40 years ago, and they turn her into this survivalist who's basically just preparing for the day that she gets to take Michael Myers down. And it's strange that that's the thing that she's about, but her crossing paths with him is completely, like, a little bit more than coincidental.
Yeah, like it's designed by a character, but not like a Deus Ex Machina style. Yeah, like I agree. I think it works.
Yeah. And the thing that I wish they had done, just to jump right to it, is
Go for it.
And I think this probably would have given the end of the movie a much different tone. But you have Laurie being so obsessed with Michael Myers and trapping him and killing him in this house. She has lived every day of her life thinking about him and thinking about the danger of him and the possibility of taking him down. Whereas, as you learn through this movie, he could not give two shits about who's in front of him. He's just going to kill whoever happens to be there. What I wish they had done is I wish that when they trapped him in the basement, and especially because there's a running theme about the doctor wanting to hear him speak and have him say something because he never says anything. He never has.
Yeah.
I really wanted, when they had him trapped in the basement at the end, when Laurie was looking down at him, I really wished he had said, "Who are you?" Because in that moment, everything she had been driving towards would have been absolutely shattered, because he doesn't even know who she is. He's just a killing machine, and she just happens to be in the way. There was no magical thing that brought them together. There's no reason that he's going after her. The fact that he attacked her 40 years ago was just because she was there, and the fact that he attacked her 40 years later is just because she was there.
But all right, so here's my rebuttal. Mm-hmm. If that's the reason that you find this, I hesitate to call it a relationship given your parameters, but I'm going to anyway. If that's the reason you find that relationship interesting and compelling, I actually think it's better that he doesn't speak to her.
Yeah. Because
he's never spoken to anybody. So by saying his only words to her, it's marking her as special somehow.
True. I guess my feeling is that it's by having him say something like that to her, it kind of is. It feels like more of an endpoint for her journey, because she spent so much time thinking about this guy that the fact that he's like, "I don't even know who you are," is sort of like just a pulling the rug out from under her kind of moment. But I do understand what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, and I also I don't know. So I don't know how much I believe that Michael Myers ends up back at Laurie's house purely out of coincidence, and that there's no recognition there whatsoever. Mm-hmm. Because he's killed a bunch of people, but it's not like he's killed like dozens or hundreds of people. He's killed his sister. Mm-hmm. And then he's killed how many people does he kill in the original movie? Maybe 4 or 5?
5. I think they say in this movie he killed 5, yeah.
And she is ultimately the one who does stop him.
Sure.
So even if he's not like sitting incarcerated and like dwelling on her, I still think there would be like it is a known fact that like serial killers in different ways relive their crimes. Mm-hmm. So I feel like there would at least be some piece of him that, maybe he wouldn't put together that this older woman in front of him is Laurie, but I feel like it maybe wouldn't be just totally devoid of any, like...
Well...
I don't know.
I think I am more inclined... I also formed that opinion after I saw it the first time, which was before they mentioned that they were going to do another one. So I thought if this was going to be the end of the story, that would be a nice way to go. But
yeah.
I do like the idea that he doesn't realize... He eventually does realize who she is in that moment at the end. Like, there is that moment of recognition, which you could bring into some extent probably in the next two, where maybe he actually is going after her now. But yeah, I never got the sense that he was specifically going after her until, really at all. Because the way that they show him killing people is fairly just who happens to be in front of him. And they have that great scene where that one shot scene where he just goes house to house and kills 2 people just for the hell of doing it, I guess.
Yeah, that not to change subjects, but that scene where the camera is like outside of the living room window and the woman's inside on the phone, and you see him walk by, you can see his shadow on the side of the house next door through her windows, and then as she's chatting, he very quietly just comes in behind her, like through the back door, and kills her. That was so well done.
Yeah. They I think what the biggest success of this movie, kind of like as I said at the beginning, is they really recalibrate Michael Myers into something that I find interesting and scary, because there's nothing scary about whatever they did to him later in this movie series. It's
yeah. But I think he is scary in the first one.
Sure. Yes. Yeah. I
think they sort of direct him back into that, not that exact mold, but like more similar to how he was in the original.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And I think they realize that's the way you have to go with him, because it's kind of like when we were talking about, I forget which, was probably Wes Craven's New Nightmare, where we were talking a little bit about Freddy versus Jason, and how every time they tried to do that movie, whoever wrote a new draft of it just kept driving further and further off the road.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until they pulled back onto the road and were like, okay, let's just remember what makes these things work and do that. And they did that, and it worked great.
Yeah.
I think with this movie, that's what makes it work so well, at least from the standpoint of Michael Myers, is that they do realize, going back to that first one, he is this unknowable shape, as he's referred to in the credits, and by
I love that.
by name in the movie by Jamie Lee Curtis. calls him
the shape.
Yeah. He's this unknowable boogeyman that in the original movies, Dr. Loomis's rants that he goes on eventually start turning into Michael is the embodiment of evil, and he's this they get more and more over the top, but his original,
the devil in human form and these kinds of things.
His original rant about Michael Myers, from what I remember, is more that he is just this unknowable being who just has violence inside him, and I find that much more scary and interesting as a movie villain.
I agree, and I think something that's always been compelling to me about Michael Myers is that you never fully know. I mean, and I'm talking strictly about the original Halloween and this movie. Mm-hmm. It's never clearly defined if he's just a man or if there is something more about him.
Right.
Like, it's never spelled out for you. You're never told. There are a couple things that kind of hint at the fact that, like, he's not just human, but there's nothing overt enough that it's like, aha, obviously he's a demon, or he's, the embodiment of all that's evil in humankind. Like, it's not obvious. You don't know. Like, for all intents and purposes, he's just some guy.
Right.
And I think something that this movie does that's really interesting is you never quite see his face, but you do see it sort of obliquely, like through sort of blurred reflections, or just like ever so slightly off camera, or just turned away, so all you see is kind of the line of his jaw on one side. Like, you see enough to know that what you're looking at is a human man, but you never see a full face. The only time he fully faces the camera is when he's wearing the mask.
Right. Yeah, they lean a lot on his messed up eye, too. You get a lot of flashes of his messed up eye very quickly.
That's true.
But I was kind of struck by that a little bit at the beginning, where it's still weird for me to think of Michael Myers as like a 61-year-old man. Like that they
but I love it. I think it's great.
Yeah, I think it works. It's just such a strange, it's a weird concept for me personally to try to have to get past, because these characters tend to be so, I mean, he's literally faceless, so they tend to be sort of timeless as well. Like, Halloween H20, you don't think about, oh, now he's like 45 or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, no, but I think it's... So I don't want to get too into talking about the original Halloween, because I'm sure it's on our list.
Oh, yeah.
So I can save all of my fun trivia on that one for that episode. But just in general terms, something else that I always found compelling about the original that I think this one does a good job of replicating is that feeling of, like, not quite an anonymous evil, but, like, he's like a 61-year-old dude. He's like somebody's dad's age or somebody's grandfather's age, and he's still evil. Like, he's still a mass murdering psycho. Like, age has not softened him. Like, his nature is his nature, and just because he's older now and maybe looks less frightening if you were to see him without the mask, doesn't mean he's less capable of harm. Right. And I think there's something really interesting about that, where it's like, you know, he could just be the harmless old man who lives across the street, but he's not.
Yeah.
And I like that tension, that without the mask, he might be kind of weird looking, but he would just be a guy, but that doesn't change his nature.
Right.
Which I just think makes, like, an interesting villain, where there's not a lot of makeup, there's not a lot of, like, physical trait. It's not like Freddy Krueger, where he's got a horrible burned face and his fedora and his, like, weapon hands. Like, he's got the mask, but he doesn't even need all that. He just is what he is.
Right.
I don't know.
Well, what we do know about him is that he is annoyed, as we all are, by intrusive podcasters. I apologize to everybody listening to this.
That was, like, the most fun thing,
you know,
to watch this and just say to you, like, hey, are we looking into our future?
Well, yeah.
Like, are we going to get murdered in a gas station restroom?
I mean, if that's what happens on the other end of us having, like, an over $3,000 budget to do this show, then I guess we got it coming. But I found...
So long as we stay under that, we'll be fine.
Yeah. No problem there. I found the podcaster thing interesting because the first time I saw it, I thought it was kind of cheesy. This time I recognized it a little bit more as them sort of calling out some of these more graphic true crime reporters as fairly opportunistic.
Yeah.
Because what they use these characters for essentially is to have them give graphic retellings of what happened in the first movie, as though they are doing it for their show.
Yes.
And I'm fine with it. I think it's a clever way to use those types of characters, but I do think it dates the movie.
I was just going to say that.
Yeah, in a way that the original Halloween is kind of like Carrie, as we were saying last week, where it is of the late 70s, but it's not rooted there. Like it's not as dated as you would think it would be, because there is not a lot of contemporary references and stuff. It's a fairly timeless story.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I definitely agree. Like, using the sort of podcasters to deliver your exposition in a slightly less ham-handed way, it's sort of an interesting trick, but it definitely feels a little bit like a narrative shortcut.
Yeah, because it's only a couple steps away from. Let's put it this way: in the hands of a less skilled director or filmmakers, you end up essentially with what they did with Halloween, whatever the one after H20 is, with Busta Rhymes, because that one is like about reality.
Is it like a reality TV show? Yes. Oh, I did see part of that one. God, I hated it.
And, like, you know, it's like it's
so
not
terrible.
It's not entirely dissimilar to that in concept, because you're taking something that is popular now and making it thankfully in this one it's not a huge part of the story, whereas in the Busta Rhymes one that's like the whole story.
Right.
But it is an interesting choice that I don't know if I love.
Yeah, it's tough because on the one hand, kind of as you just said, thankfully, it's not a huge part of the overarching movie. But on the other hand, because it is, in the end, when you think about this movie in totality, it's a fairly minor section that needs these podcasters. Like pretty much we have them in order to get the view of Michael when he's still incarcerated in that awesome, trippy, kind of 70s feeling mental institution.
Yeah.
Which was just, I mean, not to get too digress off my point, but like visually I fucking loved that.
Yeah, that outdoor courtyard area was
my
pretty
God.
awesome. Yeah.
That was so great.
Which is kind of, we should just install those all over the place because they were social distancing fairly well. Having their,
I mean,
and if you're talking about dating the show that you're listening to or watching, I just did it pretty successly. But
well, I mean, you're dating it for the entire year of 2020, apparently.
Yeah.
So, but so we use the podcasters for that, which is great. And then we use the podcasters to sort of get into Laurie's house the first time. Mm-hmm. But then they don't really do anything beyond that. Like we don't really need them for anything beyond that. And I feel like there's an easier way to do that without the podcasters, which is you just do that opening scene and you have the doctor going through the hospital and making his rounds, and then he goes outside and he walks up and says, you know, hello, Michael, how are we today? And tries to talk to him, and you get that kind of creepy, you know, maybe he says, we're trying something new today. We're going to try to do some exposure therapy, and then he pulls out the mask. Like, you could do that, essentially that same scene. And then for getting into Laurie's house, you could have the sheriff's deputy, whose name I am blanking on.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
he could come to visit her and say, you know, hey, I just wanted to check on you because, you know, I know you know the day is coming where they're transferring him.
Yeah.
And you could have, like, essentially the same baseline scenes with the characters you already have in that movie without trying to make it feel, like, contemporary and hip and with it, because we're talking about podcasts.
Yeah, especially because after they serve their exposition function, they're just killed off. Like, there's no point
exactly like if one of them survived and came back somehow and did something important a little bit later on at like a pivotal moment in the movie, I would be like, okay, I see why you had them there. I see why you wanted to keep them.
They come back and they say the podcast is a hit. And Michael Myers is like, oh, that's great. I'd love to do an interview for your show. And that gets him to stop killing, and they finally get to him. It's your idea is better than the one I was thinking of, which was at the very least, why not just make them regular reporters who are doing an article, like a 40th anniversary article or something, instead of specifically podcasters.
No one reads journalism anymore.
Well, but I mean, that's or writing a book. They could be writing a book.
Sure. Writing a book, doing some sort of We're going to make a film. We're going to do whatever, a documentary. Even it was like. Yeah.
But I like your idea better, which is you can do the same things essentially with the characters you've already established, and that was one of the things I did want to talk about because I think we've talked about this a little bit on this show. I get all my shows mixed up at this point. What I haven't
just
brought
have
up.
So many.
I know. I'm so popular with forcing my way into people's lives. There's a thing that I finally kind of came up with a name for, which is the narrative cone of vision, which is a cone of vision. It's a drawing perspective term. Basically, it's if you're drawing something in perspective, if you go outside of the cone of vision, your perspective just starts to skew and everything just starts to lose control. So the focus of your drawing is inside the cone of vision. And the narrative cone of vision to me is this idea of establishing how far your environment reaches. So it's like there's a reason why in Friday the 13th movies, the cops never show up at the lake. Because once the cops show up at the lake, then that you bringing up a lot more questions like, oh, so Jason exists in the world? How does that impact the world? It usually
right.
It usually just brings up more questions and widens your circle to the point where it doesn't feel like you are maximizing the environment that you've set up for your story.
Right. It doesn't add anything to the story.
Right. All it adds is more questions. And I was wondering about this movie if the cone of vision, so to speak, is too wide, because there is a lot of peripheral stuff in this that just sort of falls by the wayside, whether it's the podcasters or
the excessive Lonnie references.
Yeah, Lonnie, sure. The daughter's boyfriend who just disappears halfway through the movie.
Lonnie's son.
Lonnie's son, yes. Even the cop stuff. Even the cop stuff, I feel like is really.
I know you hate a cop subplot.
Well,
I
cops,
know you hate it.
The cops are kind of baked into the concept of Halloween, though, because they're there in the first one, and they play a pretty big. Isn't Laurie's dad a cop or something, or one of the girls' dad's a cop in the in the original? I think.
Yes.
So they're kind of baked into the fabric of Halloween, but I just wonder if, and I think what you're saying about using the characters you have to tell that exposition and tell that story is a better way to focus in on this cone of vision sort. It sounds silly when I say it, but it's the best thing I can come up with. But you know what I mean?
No, I like it. Yeah. No, I totally agree, and I think part of it is that, like, you are narrowing that sort of narrative zone and narrative vision, but you're also taking advantage of characters that have pre-existing relationships,
right?
That are established before the movie, and you don't need to sort of like, all right. The podcasters offer, they drive up to Laurie's gate, because of course her house is in the middle of nowhere and it's heavily secured. So they drive up to her gate and they ring the buzzer, and she looks at them through a security camera, and they say, "Oh, we're here. We're making an investigative journalist podcast, blah, 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 interview you, Michael Myers, blah, blah, blah." And at first she doesn't want to let them in until the woman of the two podcasters says, "How does $3,000 sound?" And then the gate buzzes and they're allowed in. They go into the house. They sort of like ham-fistedly throw some quasi-provocative questions at her. And then she says, "Well, that's enough. I will take my $3,000 now, and you can leave."
Right. And
it's like, I mean,
all you do is you get her $3,000 that she can then give to her granddaughter. It's like, it's not.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's sort of this weird where it's like, she's living in a nice house. Like, she doesn't look like she's strapped for cash. Maybe she is, but it adds nothing to the narrative, even if she was. And so it's just this weird, like, $3,000 is a good amount of money, but is it enough that she would just allow two random strangers to come into her house? I don't think so. Like, the Laurie Strode in this movie is intensely paranoid.
Right.
And the idea of her just letting these people in, like, she doesn't know them. She doesn't know what they could do. I feel like that character would not be on board with that. But if it were the sheriff's deputy or, you know, somebody from her life who she knew, then I would believe that conversation a little bit more.
Right. Yeah. And with the scene at the beginning when they're talking to Michael outside in the courtyard, using more of the doctor, maybe it tips their hand a little bit too much, but the doctor ends up playing a pretty pivotal role as far as, like I said, he ends up being the reason that Laurie and Michael Myers get back together. But aside from that,
back together like they were exes who broke up.
Yeah, well, he's the best man. He spoke at the wedding. He is fairly peripheral for most of the movie, and I don't know if that is intentional to hide the twist that comes about halfway through, or maybe 3/4 of the way through, or not. But it is, or if it's just to divert a little attention away from that Dr. Loomis character, because it's the usual kind of character they have in these Halloween movies. I don't know. But it does make it feels like it makes more sense to have him have a little bit of a bigger role.
Yeah, like some sort of like showing him trying to connect with or treat Michael in some form. I think would help, especially where there's the moment where they're loading him onto the bus and the doctor says, he's still my patient until he's admitted into the new, I don't know exactly what he says, but he pretty much says until the transfer is complete, he's still my patient, so I'm sticking with him till the end. And he gets on the bus with all of the patients being transferred to what I'm assuming is like a maximum security prison, which just seems like that's insane. Like, what are you doing? Why are you putting yourself back there with all of them?
Right, yeah.
And I think it would maybe feel a little more genuine if you saw something of him in the beginning trying to be like, 11th hour Hail Mary time. I'm going to try to reach him before he's completely condemned and there's no helping him.
Or even, clearly he's got more sinister intentions about what he's trying to get out of him.
Yeah. No, I'm making the sort of, the excuse.
Sure. Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, he's got these sinister intentions, and so if you use him in that beginning scene as the one who's talking to Michael, you can play it as though he is honestly trying to get through to him, but then when you think about it later, it's like, oh, he's actually actively antagonizing him on purpose to try and...
Exactly, yeah. It would give this really interesting, where it would be something that you could watch the scene the first time and read it one way,
yeah, exactly.
And then with the knowledge you have later on, it would twist it and turn it into something totally different, which I love. I love those kinds of scenes.
Yeah, oh, absolutely, yeah. Yeah.
So this being my first time watching this movie, I will admit I was genuinely surprised when the doctor, when the twist happened and the doctor kind of revealed that he was also a psychopath and was trying to facilitate this sort of climactic moment between Michael Myers and Laurie. I was surprised. It got me. I was genuinely shocked.
Yeah, I remember being fairly surprised at that as well, especially that they kill the sheriff in that scene.
Yeah,
because he seemed like someone who was going to stick around a little bit longer, or possibly make it through all the way. Yeah. Yeah,
I thought there was going to be some scene where he, saved, came out of nowhere and saved them, or I don't know.
Yeah. On the flip side of this narrative cone, going too wide, I think what it does really well is it recognizes, and I think a lot of horror movies kind of forget this, especially as they got away from the final girl concept and started being like, oh, well, what if this one, her boyfriend lives? What if in this one, it's a boyfriend and like the fun friend lives? What if in this one, it's never really like narratively earned. It's just like, we didn't kill everybody this time.
Keep the final girl and the stoner.
Right. What this realizes, and I think makes it the strongest slasher movies realize, is who the focus of the movie is, and they are the only ones who get out alive, because the focus of this story is Laurie, her daughter, and Allison. Karen is the mom. I remember that because that's a hard name to forget these days.
Because you've been on the internet at some point in the last 6 months.
Yeah. And those three,
Allison.
Those three are the center of the story. So if Ray, the dad, and I only know that one because I looked it up before we started. If Ray makes it out at the end, you don't feel anything. It doesn't feel earned. It doesn't feel like it makes any narrative sense. But if Ray dies, that circle of violence gets closer and closer and closer to Laurie and her daughter and granddaughter, where I was legitimately surprised that one of them didn't die. I was expecting maybe the mom to die.
I thought Jamie Lee Curtis. I thought Laurie was going to go out in a blaze of glory.
That makes the most sense. Yes.
Yeah, I thought it was going to be sort of more of an official passing the torch kind of movie, but I'm glad it wasn't.
Yeah, I think if she did die, I think that would mark the second time in this series that Laurie Strode dies.
Oh, at least.
Because I think she dies. I think in the Busta Rhymes
she definitely dies.
Yeah, in the Busta Rhymes one, I think she dies in like the opening 10 minutes or something like that.
Damn it, that fucking movie.
But yeah, I was surprised that one of them didn't die, and I was happy that they didn't, because I think that's not what the story is about either. The story is kind of about these three women coming together and using all of their strength to take out this monster. How did you feel about the mother-daughter granddaughter dynamic?
You know, I liked it because I think it's something with all three of those generations you don't see very often.
Yeah, I can't think of another horror movie that has three generations of people acting or working together and having problems and stuff like this.
Yeah, especially three generations of women.
Right. Oh, definitely, yes.
Like, I think that's very unique. We see a lot of, like, sons and fathers and you know, parent with child. I shouldn't narrow it down just to men or women. There's a lot of those relationships in these movies. And then every so often there's some where it's sort of like my wise grandfather, you know, bequeathed me this secret of I'm actually a vampire hunter. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot, there's not a lot, but there's some of that kind of thing too. There's not a ton of like, you know, grandmother, mother, granddaughter. And then also having it be this sort of like representations of bad motherhood that aren't that don't make the character, like, just because she was a quote unquote bad mom doesn't make her a bad person.
Right.
And I think that's interesting. Like, it's really easy to have have a character be a bad mom or a bad dad or just like a bad parent.
Right.
But it's more interesting if it's like, no, but there are actual reasons behind it, and it's more complicated than just like yes, there's the line that I think Laurie says where it's, you know, she says something pretty much like, if the way I raised your mother was bad and she hates me for it, but she'll live, then I can live with that.
Right.
And I think that's an interesting way of approaching this.
I love how much subtle storytelling is being, or I should say nonverbal storytelling is being done just by experiencing what the relationship of these characters is. Because if you do the math out, the Michael Myers thing happened 40 years ago. So that means Laurie Strode's daughter is younger than 40. She's got to be at least, let's say, 2 or 3 years max younger than 40. And she's married to a guy who's clearly a lot older than she is. And her daughter is also in high school, so she probably had her daughter really young, or fairly young anyway. So I think you can look into that and take a lot of stuff out of it as far as what has been going on in the Strode family for the past 40 years.
Yeah, and there's also this interesting, it kind of reminds me a little bit of Ginger Snaps, in that the dad is really ineffectual. Mm-hmm. Like, he's sort of a goof, he's kind of a goober, he's like bringing up inappropriate things at the dinner with the boyfriend, and the mom is like, stop it, just let it go, don't talk about that. Like, he's kind of embarrassing, he's kind of like just this kind of goofy whatever guy. And when you get the flashbacks of Karen's childhood as Laurie's daughter, there's really no mention of a dad.
Right, yeah.
It's just the two of them. Mm-hmm. So it's like there's this really interesting, like, dearth of father figures.
Yeah, and it makes sense that she would probably have married an older guy too.
Yeah, exactly. Like she's kind of looking for this like stability and like, yeah. But another thing I was going to say is there aren't a lot of father figures and older men in this movie, but like the majority of people who die in this movie are men.
Yeah. Yes. Very much
I think
so.
only one woman dies. I think Laurie, Jesus. I think Allison's friend dies, and I think she's the only woman.
Well, the two people that he kills in the one shot going house to house are both women.
Right.
But as far as like
Yep.
characters who have speaking roles, yes, they're pretty much all male. Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just interesting. It's kind of a reversal because I feel like most horror movies, you either get a roughly equivalent body count in terms of gender, or sometimes you get a lot more women getting murdered.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I hadn't thought about that actually. But that's a good point. There's only 1, 2, 3, 4. There's really only 4 women in the movie. And then, 5 if you count the podcaster. She got killed.
That's true.
So there's 5 women in the movie, and then probably at least 5, if not there's more than 5 men in the movie. So
Yeah.
there's actually more male characters than female characters, and all of the men get killed. And
Right,
only
because
2 of the women get killed.
Right, because there's more male characters, but they're kind of more secondary or even
Right.
tertiary,
Right, yeah.
like less important characters. It's just an interesting kind of, to sort of like, I think this movie does a good job of focusing on that, like, uniquely female experience of the fear of physical violence being perpetrated on you without becoming preachy or like throwing it too far in your face or like overdoing it in terms of like, we're going to get real gender studies about this. Like it doesn't do that, but it still focuses that experience in a way that I think actually really works.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think it's really strong in the message as far as that goes, but it's not beating you over the head and going for like a really like, let's all do the Rosie the Riveter thing into the camera, like girl powery thing. It's like, no, they're just they're flawed women who are put in the situation, and they come out stronger at the end of it. I think it's a good story.
I do too, and I like the fact that like even Laurie, who is been preparing for this for her whole life and all of this stuff, like she's not sort of a a Linda Hamilton, Sarah Connor style badass. Mm-hmm. Like she's pretty badass, but she's like realistically badass.
Right.
And she also is deeply flawed. Like she clearly was a super fucked up mother. She's probably a bit of an alcoholic.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
From what we get. She's willing to sort of jerk around the podcasters. Like she's not nice in any form of the word, really.
She's also still scared of Michael Myers. Like she's not, Linda Hamilton in Terminator, she's scared to an extent, but she is very much like a kick down the door, proactive, I'm going to do a bunch of pull-ups in my cell kind of person. Whereas Jamie Lee Curtis...
I'm going to make everyone who watches this a little bit gay.
Yeah. But Laurie is a lot more like she is just preparing for the worst. And even at the end, it's not like when they finally do, Michael and Laurie finally do come to blows with each other, it's not like, shotgun cock, let's do this. She's scared. She's fighting for her life against this monster, and she's taken precautions, but they've only gotten her so far, and she almost gets killed because of it.
Yeah, and I like that a lot, because I think where there is that feeling that Michael Myers is maybe a little bit, maybe not like more than human, but outside of human. Like his, it's clear that his brain does not function the way a normal person's brain does. He doesn't share the same feelings and emotions and associations that the average person does. So he's just like outside of the human experience, and Laurie is very deeply in it.
Yes.
Which I think is like a really great contrast between the two of them, where she is constantly dealing with her emotions and her circumstances and the things that are happening to her have an effect on her that she then needs to react to and alter her choices or do something about. Whereas Michael Myers is just like tunnel vision, I'm going to kill a bunch of people. Nothing's going to stop me or stand in my way. I'm not going to bother with anything else.
Right. Now, if we're stripping away characters that aren't needed in this movie,
oh boy,
do you feel like Allison is a necessary character? Because she almost feels kind of superfluous, doesn't she?
Yes and no.
Yeah. I guess, Mike, because I was thinking about it as we were talking about who the story's about and all this kind of stuff. I was thinking how 9 times out of 10, and I think they may have actually done something like this already in the Halloween franchise, but 9 times out of 10, this story is Laurie Strode, Laurie Strode's estranged daughter, Laurie Strode's granddaughter, but the granddaughter is like 5. You know what I mean? Where it's where the granddaughter becomes more of a what's the word I'm looking for? Not liability, but it's another element of the fear being built into it. Like, oh God, now there's a kid involved. Whereas Allison is 15, 16, however old she's supposed to be. She is a young adult, capable woman. But if you look at what she does in this movie, her role is really not important, kind of.
Yeah. It's
other than
so
at the
it's
end,
tough.
I guess.
Yeah, but it's also tough because the question is kind of like, how much purpose does she serve specifically to this narrative, to this exact story that's being told in this movie? And then how much of a purpose does she serve as sort of a symbol or a touchstone or a reference point to a lot of things in the horror movie genre in general, and the Halloween franchise kind of in the middle of that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where it's like narratively in this movie, I think the purpose she kind of ultimately serves is the bridge between her mother and her grandmother, and kind of bringing them back together. Yeah. Because it motivates, like, why are they together when all of this starts? It's because Allison stops answering her phone.
Right.
And that, coupled with the fact that the bus transport has crashed and all the inmates have escaped, it's like, oh God, it's happening again. And that's enough to get Laurie and her daughter to reconcile, because they both love the granddaughter.
Right.
And then on the other hand, for the Halloween franchise, she stands in for Laurie when Laurie was younger, and sort of like, because Laurie in the original is, she's a little more practical than her friends. She's kind of like, she's nice and she's friendly, but she's got a little bit of like a no nonsense streak to her. Like, she's a little bit more down to earth than a lot of the other teenagers, and you can see that in the granddaughter.
Right.
And so I think, like having the echoes of just sort of like putting that same kind of character who's like young and sheltered, but maybe not naive, like putting her back in peril, kind of, it harkens back to the original movie in a way that I think people who are fans of it find satisfying.
Yeah. It's interesting thinking about the characters in this movie and thinking about who they end up focusing on. It's because she is kind of the focus. Because Laurie's kind of the main character, but she's also kind of not. I guess she kind of splits equal time with Allison, and Allison doesn't feel like she's necessarily driving the story. She's sort of being fairly reactionary, but. Yeah. You do get this thing at the end when they're driving away where I don't know how you interpreted that final shot of her with the knife in her hand, but my thought was just this idea of generation of trauma being passed down through generations, where it's like now it's her turn.
Yeah.
I mean, the mom got out of it. I mean, the mom didn't have to deal with this. I guess it skips a generation.
Well, I think her trauma was like her childhood.
Right, yes.
Yeah. God, I was going to say something and I lost it. Shit. All right. I'll try and think of it again.
But yeah, it's just this I guess it's this idea that Michael has not only impacted Laurie's life, but has impacted the daughter's life and the granddaughter's life because of what happened to Laurie and how she dealt with it.
Yeah, and so I got my thought back. It's interesting, like, what you were just saying about how, like, this sort of, like, who's the main character and, like, all of that's kind of fuzzy.
Mm-hmm.
It almost reminds me of the second movie in trilogies.
Sure.
Where there's that sort of, like, mushy feeling, like, narratively, where there's, like, some references to things that happened in the first one, but they're clearly also kind of setting up for another one.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I feel like this movie has a little bit of that. Like, there's enough sort of, like, callbacks and, like, fun, playful references to the original that I think it smooths it out a little bit. But it does, the more I think about it, like, kind of introducing the daughter and the granddaughter and these different things, it does feel a little bit like it is sort of intentionally dropping in a few elements that leave a door open for a third movie in this version of the Halloween franchise.
Which there will be, because they shot them, I believe they shot them back to back.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah. The next one comes out next year, 2021. They actually just coincidentally dropped the
because
the teaser
nothing
trailer.
comes out in 2020.
I know, yeah, dead zone. The Oscars, I was thinking the other day, the Oscars are going to be really interesting next year. It's going to be all Netflix movies.
Oh my God.
But yeah, they as we're recording this, the day before, they just dropped the first teaser trailer for Halloween Kills, which is the second movie. I would put money heavily on Laurie does not make it out of the second movie.
Yeah.
Like that's just makes sense. Maybe that's too easy, too much of a cliche, but it feels like she's not making it out of the second movie.
I mean, at some point, Jamie Lee Curtis probably wants to, like, sit down.
Yeah.
Like, at some point, just, like, being, like, you know, ass-kicking Laurie Strode is got to be a little exhausting for a woman of her golden years. So I agree. I don't see her being in a Halloween Kills 2 Electric Boogaloo.
The music in this movie, fantastic. Done by John Carpenter and his son Cody and his godson, whose name is
Clay McCormick.
Yeah, I wish. His godson Daniel Davies. They've been working with him the past few years on the original albums that he's put out called Lost Themes and Lost Themes 2. It's his first involvement with the series since, I believe, Halloween 3. And he's still got it, man. That's a great soundtrack.
Yeah. It is. It's really great. I think it does a great job of pulling forward some of the music and the sounds and the sort of general tone from the original while doing something kind of new and different with it as well.
Yeah, it's definitely they definitely found the right balance between referencing the old stuff and also having a more modern sound to it. It's funny. After we watched it last night, I was thinking about how much I love the soundtrack, and which I own on vinyl, and I also own the soundtrack to Halloween 3, and I remembered that Carpenter and his music partner at the time, Alan Howarth, I think his name is, also did the music for Halloween 2. And so I went back and I listened to that soundtrack. It sounds a lot. It's very similar to the Halloween 3 soundtrack, except it also has the Halloween theme in it, which 3 does not.
Does it have the Silver Shamrock?
Unfortunately, no. There are the masks are in this though during the Halloween sequence.
That was great. That was a really fun little sort of Easter egg, having the witch and the skeleton and the pumpkin mask.
Halloween 3 is one of those movies. I know people love it. I see why people love it, but I don't think it's a good movie. I don't particularly love it, but I do really appreciate the stuff around it. Like I really like the imagery of those masks and stuff, and the soundtrack is really good.
It's a movie that's not always the best to watch, but it's great to know about.
Exactly. That's a really good way to put it. Man, you're a really good editor.
It's almost like I do it for pay every day.
You just take my ramblings and just funnel them down into something that sounds a lot better. Yeah, I don't know why. It's just one of those movies where it's just the stuff around it is fun, but it's not. It was a nice try for what they were trying to do to do this sort of spin-off thing to turn it into a anthology type movie series. It was a nice try. Unfortunately, people were coming for Michael, not for the concept of Halloween.
Yeah.
But yeah, the soundtrack to Halloween 2 is a lot more of its time. And I think this one managed to also feel kind of timeless in that it's very much the same kind of feeling as the original, but they do bring it to a fairly modern place without it sounding like they're not. It's not like they did the stuff they were doing in like the 90s where it would be the Halloween theme, but it's got like this industrial remix to it or some shit like that. You know what I mean?
Or the early 90s where it's got a funky beat.
Oh yeah. Oh, like Friday the 13th Part 3 when they remixed the theme into that awesome like disco song.
Oh my god. I'm so glad that you knew that was what I was thinking of.
Oh yeah.
Oh god.
Yeah, but great soundtrack. I don't know why he's not doing soundtracks for other movies, because if I had the money, I would hire him to do my soundtrack in a heartbeat.
I get the vibe that part of it is he very much guards his creative freedom and his artistic freedom.
I think he does at this
I don't
point,
think he likes doing things that other people get to have a final say on.
Yeah, that's a very good thought. Yes.
And who can blame him?
Just briefly talk about the mask a little bit, because you mentioned last night that the mask looks great in this, which I agree with. And honestly, the mask is what puts me off from most of these Halloween movies, because it almost always looks terrible. It looks good in the first one, but it's just, I don't know why they couldn't manage to get it right. But every single one of the sequels, it just looks stupider and cheaper. But they managed to nail it in this one.
I mean, again, I don't want to go too far into original Halloween territory on this, but there is a whole, kind of real life mythos behind the mask. Where this, right?
Oh yes, the Shatner mask.
Yes, it's a William Shatner kind of. I don't even remember if it was like an official William Shatner mask or sort of like a rip-off William Shatner mask, where it was at the point where William Shatner had gained a bit of weight, shall we say. So he'd lost a little bit of the bone structure that made him such a hottie in the original Star Trek. So yeah, they just kind of took that and spray painted it white and then put this like crazy hair on it. And it just seems like part of why that worked is that it was fairly simple.
Right, yeah.
And then later on, different iterations kept trying to, like you were saying before about, they kind of kept trying to, like, they took it off the rails, they wanted to go in a different direction, they sort of gussied it up. And the reason why I think it works in this one is it goes back closer to that original, but it also has sort of, like, wear and tear and, like, age marks.
Yeah, I actually really like the mask in the first Rob Zombie remake too, for the same reason, because they managed to find a nice like weathered sort of way to do it. And I think the thing with the Michael Myers mask is it is a very exceptionally simple thing, simple design, simple image, but simple is very difficult to do. It's not just because it's simple doesn't mean it's easy to do. Because at least if you're going by like drawing, I know this much. If your style is a very simple style, you have to consider every line you put down that much more before you do it. because you can't waste any, you know, you only have, you're keeping things limited. And so you have to consider what you're doing that much more because you don't have any line to waste or compositional space to waste. And when you're dealing with a mask that's just white with hair on it, that's surprisingly difficult to get to look not stupid.
Yeah.
And I think for most of the sequels, they don't manage to make it look not stupid.
I would agree with that. And I think that part of the reason why it's so great when it's done right is that sort of blank affect. Like we get so much information about other people from their faces that we don't even realize. And so the whole reason why masks are scary at all is that they take that away from us. And having that mask that like, you know, pretty roughly approximates a real human face, but then have it like devoid of any even possible expression makes it like kind of uniquely frightening in a way that, like, I always found Freddy Krueger kind of laughable. You know, he's got like he's great. I love him, but he's got these like exaggerated features and he's always kind of mugging for the camera a little bit. And then Jason's wearing a hockey mask, which is like, subjectively scary, but there's just something different about the sort of like a human face that can never make an expression.
Right. Yeah.
I've always found that interesting. I also like that. I like that the mask in this one has aged along with the man who wears it. Like I like that sort of pairing of like nobody bought this mask in the early days of the internet and like put it in a glass case and kept it pristine.
Right.
Like that mask looks like it's seen some shit.
Right. Yeah.
Which is interesting.
Have you seen, I think it's the trailer for Halloween H20. There's a famous shot where Jamie Lee Curtis sees Michael Myers through like the window of a door, like they're face to face with just the glass in front of them. And it's like the first time she's seen him in 20 years or whatever. And apparently the mask in that scene is CGI because the mask they used on the day is just looked awful. And so they had to go in, and this is like I haven't gone back. I got to go back and look at it and see what it looks like. But this is 1998, so I can't imagine it looks great. But again, maybe it's simple enough.
Probably not.
Maybe it's simple enough that they managed to hide it. But have you seen the Rob Zombie remake?
No.
I wouldn't recommend it. It's I appreciate what he was trying to do, but I think he widened the narrative cone way too much. And so the first like half of the movie is just let's learn every little detail about Michael Myers' backstory and why he became a monster, which
it's that one.
Yeah. And it's a Rob Zombie movie, so everybody in it is like a shit-kicking redneck that just says like cunt a lot. Sorry, Mom. But I will say...
Also, sorry, Mom.
Yeah. I will say you're sorry for associating with people with such dirty mouths.
Exactly.
I will say the second half of the Rob Zombie one, where they start to do the actual Halloween story, I actually thought was pretty good because he managed to dial it up to the point where it felt less like campy horror movie slasher violence, and it felt a lot more real and visceral. So Michael Myers killing people in that one just felt that much scarier because of how visceral it was, which I actually thought was a little bit lacking in this one. Because I
was actually going to say that, yeah. Like some of the kills, I couldn't tell. I couldn't tell if it was because I felt like some of them were so predictable, so I was very ready for it, or if they just kind of happen without a lot of like fanfare.
Yeah, I was thinking just now. Aside from the podcasters, do we actually see him? We don't really see him kill people that much. It's a lot of off-screen stuff. The goriest thing that he does that we see is when he stomps on the doctor's head. But aside from that, most of the killing happens off-screen or is obscured in some way. We see a lot of his the craftiness with his staging after the fact, whether it's the gate through that kid's jaw or pulling that other dude's jaw. A lot of jaw violence in this movie.
A lot of jaw violence.
But yeah, it's not really, I never really got the sense of how scary and visceral of a murderer he was.
Yeah, I think part of the problem for me, because I think the original, like, a lot of the violence was obscured. Mm-hmm. Like, there wasn't a ton of overt violence that wasn't done sort of like either, you're peering out through the eyes of the mask, mm-hmm. like Michael, and so you're only seeing these two little circles, mm-hmm. or, it's in the dark, it's behind the door, it's something like that. I think the thing that I missed in this movie was that sense of suspense.
Yeah.
That sense that the victim was really genuinely unaware, and then there was going to be an extended period of him stalking them, and them maybe getting a little uncomfortable and a little nervous, but sort of writing it off as like, oh, it's just the wind, or it's just my imagination, or I'm just hearing things, I'm being silly, I'm being ridiculous. Like, there's so much of that in the original movie, and it works so well. Whereas in this movie, there are like glimpses of that, and there are moments, but they're very brief. And in some cases, they're not there at all. Like, I would argue that the most suspenseful one is when he goes into the house with Allison's friend who's babysitting. Yeah. Like, that sequence was great. Mm-hmm. I thought that one was really, really well done. But when he's sort of going from house to house, it's sort of like almost like cut together a little too quick.
Right.
Like, they don't kind of let it breathe long enough for us to appreciate just how frightening it is that he's like, everybody's out trick-or-treating in this very busy neighborhood, and he's still stalking around in backyards and coming into houses and killing people.
Right.
And we're not really given the time to like absorb that for how frightening it is.
Yeah, they've got some good bits, like you said, the one with where he kills the friend is great, where he's in the closet and stuff. That stuff is really good.
Yeah.
The scene with the motion sensor is really great. But even there, it's like we don't see him. We see the result of that. We don't actually see him kill anybody.
Right.
But yeah, there is that element, and I think unfortunately, it's because there's a lot of plot in this movie. there's
I was going to say they feel like
on.
they had to cut things because they were pressed for time.
Yeah. Like one of my big pet peeves is when unnecessary, and this is sort of a narrative cone thing, is unnecessary movement of your characters. So, for instance, in the new series of Star Trek Picard, they have this big location that they're driving towards, which is this Borg cube that they're doing research on and shit.
We are currently watching it.
Oh, you are? Okay. Well, I think I can.
So I'm most of the way through. We only have like the last 2 episodes left.
All right. So you'll understand what I'm talking about then. So
yes.
they kind of, the Borg cube is sort of this big location, and then Picard goes to the Borg cube and then immediately leaves and then has to go back.
He has to bail like right away.
Yeah, and then he has to go back to the Borg cube again later. And it's that sort of like backtracking that I don't like narratively, and which is why it stands out to me that you've got Michael in town doing all of this stuff, and then you have to kind of artificially figure out a way to transport him to Laurie's house. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Instead of that neighborhood being the place where, okay, this is where everything comes to a head. You have
right,
things...
which would be kind of great if it was like it was Karen's house and Allison's house instead of Laurie's house, where she didn't have all of her like traps and tools and things pre-set up. Like she just like, oh shit, I'm back here in just a normal suburban house having to make do with like a kitchen knife and nothing else.
Yeah, because that's another thing that I get annoyed with sometimes too. But because her house is very cool, but I kind of have this thing story-wise where if you start the story with an advanced weapon, part of the story has to be that weapon not working or not being available when you need it to work. So you have to find another way around it. Like the second Independence Day movie drove me fucking crazy that at no point do their futuristic weapons stop working and they have to find another way to kill the aliens. It's just like, no, we just have future weapons now. We can shoot everybody. Like, you know, like that's
yeah. We just need a bigger future weapon.
Yeah, because like you've got this element that brings you confidence going into your problem, and then oops, the weapon is taken away or the element is taken away. So now you have to readapt to the situation to figure out how you're going to conquer the villain without your magic sword or whatever you want to call it.
Right. It adds a level of tension back into the narrative,
right,
where things once seemed like they would be pretty easily explained or steady. It sort of destabilizes the characters, and it destabilizes you as the audience member at the same time, because you've also been counting on, like, oh, okay, she's going to go back to the house and she's going to get him in her booby-trapped murder house and she's going to kick his ass. Right. And then if that kind of thing doesn't happen or it's taken away, then you also, like, at the same time as the character's feeling this way, you think, oh shit, she's not going to get to use all her booby traps. What is she going to do?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that never really happens, like, even because it's kind of a coin flip, because you want to see the cool house do the thing that the house is going to do, but it kind of never really goes poorly for them. Like it kind of works the way they intended it to work. And Michael never really kind of gets a leg up on the murder house there. So
the murderer murder house.
Yeah, that's just nitpicky stuff. My own story hang up stuff. I think overall this movie is really good. I think it is easily the best sequel of all of the Halloween sequels.
Oh yeah.
And I mean, maybe that's easy for me to say because I don't like any of the other ones. But
I was gonna say, I mean, it's kind of like, I will try to say it in a nicer way. I feel like this movie exceeded by far a very low bar.
And who can argue with praise like that? So just quickly, because we've gone very long.
Oh no.
How do you feel about the placement? This is number 90. This is ranked as the 90th greatest horror film of all time. Too high, too low?
I think it should be over 100.
I think so too, yeah. If we're going by our established bar, which is The Shining, I think it should definitely be lower on the list than The Shining, or closer to 200 than The Shining.
This comes in above The Shining, like in terms of like closer to number 1.
Yep.
Which is maybe that's not a fair barometer given the algorithm that Rotten Tomatoes uses, but I cannot get past it.
Yeah.
Whenever we're watching a movie and it's below, it's between numbers 1 and 100, and I just have to keep thinking to myself, like, is this better than Stanley Kubrick's The Shining?
Right.
And I'm sure some people disagree with me, and those people are wrong.
I mean, if that bar doesn't work for you, this is 2 spots higher than Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So,
like what?
Yeah.
Like, this is a great sequel.
Yes.
But just by the very nature of it being a sequel, and we're talking about the 200 greatest horror movies of all time, I don't see it coming in beyond like 130.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, well, the algorithm strikes again, I guess.
God damn it.
So yeah, that's going to do it for Halloween 2018. Hope you enjoyed our in-depth dive into all of the things we would remove from this movie, while also coming out on the other end saying we really liked it.
Yes.
I mean, is there
consistent? We are not.
Is there really a greater sign of respect other than saying everything you would change about the thing that you like? I don't think so.
I agree. I think you'll know we really don't like a movie when we spend the entire hour and a half trying to find things we do like about it.
Yeah. You know, that's something to consider as well, because we've done 17 movies, and we have yet to hit one where we both don't like it.
That's a good point.
So, I mean, I guess if the list is the 200 greatest, you're kind of going into that assuming they're all going to be pretty good. But
tune in next time for I Am the Pretty Thing That Lives in the House.
Oh, boy. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I might be asleep for that show, but I'm going to...
What are we doing next time?
Well, I'm going to hit the randomizer. Beep, boop, boop, beep, boop, 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 and we will be doing number 185, Candyman. Which I'm excited because I've only seen that movie once, and it was a very long time ago. So I'm happy to have an excuse to rewatch it.
I am excited to watch it because I feel like I tried to watch it with a couple friends when I was very young, and they got very upset, and we shut it off.
Upset because they don't like black people?
Jesus Christ.
I mean,
upset because they were like 11-year-old girls, and I was like, let's watch this movie.
I mean, I don't know what kind of people you were hanging around with then, but
all right, let's not get political.
Yeah, so that'll be fun. And thank you for joining us. If you like the show, if you want to give us a rating and review on iTunes, that would be great. And if you got any questions or anything, you can find me on Twitter. I'm at DeadMeatComic. And Amanda, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Clay.
Anytime. We will see you next time.
Bye, everybody.